Welcome, 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 my fellow legionaries, to the Alyssa Faden Show. I have never literally called this the Alyssa Faden Show before. I don't know why I just did it. But welcome to the channel that brings you mapping goodness, sexy minis, painting, and all things tabletop RPG. It has been a while since we did a self-critique of a map that we have drawn in the past, and I think we're overdue. So today, I bring to you Violetnesse, which is the city that we're looking at on the screen. Violetnesse. This I drew, I want to say back in the 90s, which doesn't sound like that long ago, but what is it? What, like 20 to 30 years ago? I mean, we're going back. It's the difference between the 60s and World War II, or the 80s and the 60s. He says, stating the obvious, but it is a while back. And this was originally drawn ink on paper. You can tell because of the very black and white, non-aliased, jagged lines here. That is a surefire giveaway. Also, you'll notice that on my ink on paper ones, that they have these little gaps here and there. And that's, I mean, here's another one. Here's a beautiful example. And that's simply because, I mean, I am eyeballing this from this kind of scale right here. So it's like, and at this scale, you don't see the gaps, you don't see the jaggedness, right? But it's only when you zoom in. Nowadays, of course, with the power of digital, we can do things a little bit differently. But let's talk about what is on this map from 20 years ago that I do now as a stylistic evolution. Few things. First and foremost, do you see these contours in the water? Well, I did contours on the land too. You can actually see a few over here on the right hand side. I started to deviate away from contours. This was an influence that I got from maps of the era, and maps of the era were, well, modern maps with contour lines, you know. So I did the same, and you know, this isn't terrible. This would be better if I color graded depth changes versus drawing black lines. And likewise with the hills, I now have a different stylistic approach to doing the hills. That, you know, is more of a shading gradient, and I do little dashed lines to show like ridge edges. But I don't do this. With the black and white, it's very, very, very harsh, the difference. So I don't contour that way. I try to make things a little bit more gradual, almost like using like a spray painter or something like that. The other thing that I want to point out, by the way, and I'm just gonna do this straight on the page here, is this is not actually white. This paper, that's white. You see that off to one side? I'll zoom in. This is white here. So this is actually drawn on white paper, but of course white paper is not really pure white. I actually went one stage further and drew on yellow for a while. So this is at least not that offensive, but you know, it's close to white, so okay. Other things that are different here. Well, you will notice that the farms, I mean, the farms were fine. The farms were okay. But it's like they've all got apparently the same crop in them. So nowadays I actually do alternate the crops. I alternate the textures in here. And I think that ends up looking a lot better for it. And then we've got more of the same over here. And again, it's not the end of the world. It's pretty good. I mean, it's fine. But I do like to alternate the texturing in my farms nowadays. I think you get a better result. The graveyard here is actually kind of on point. I do add little paths through the graveyard. I do tend to add little mausoleums and things like that. Just, I suppose you would say, a higher level of detail. But this looks okay. This is a good early iteration of it. I'm not going to complain. I think the younger me did A-okay. Now, when it comes to buildings, etc., these docks, no. Absolutely no. I don't know what happened here, by the way. I don't know really what happened here. But these docks, I'm not even sure what to say, to be perfectly honest with you. So these docks, being perfectly straight like this, A, they feel too thick, and B, they feel too regular. I kind of like to actually sort of bring out sort of different shapes and such on mine nowadays. Little sort of side jetties and stuff. I'd love to add little steps coming down or ramps and that type of thing. I like to actually bring some of the warehouses up against the waterfront and like come into the water a little bit. So I tend to draw my docks differently. We could see it over here too. But, you know, it's okay. It's okay. These are not terrible. I just try to make them more interesting nowadays, I suppose you would say. And then we've got kind of like this dockyard or something here, which honestly, I tend to view this now with more of a ship shelter, like their roofs over the ship. I think my intent originally was to actually make these like dry docks, in which case these areas right here really should be more gated in appearance. And I think that's what I was shooting for. You see this little gap right here? I think I was trying to imply gate. I really do. What would I do differently nowadays? I would draw a bloody ship or two in there. Close to construction, maybe under maintenance. Maybe some were flooded with water and we wouldn't see this line in here. And it would feel more used. So that's definitely one change that I would make. Now, the city itself, not bad. Honestly, I want to say not bad. The buildings look pretty good. The neighborhoods are well defined. I do like a well-defined neighborhood. We can see our plazas. We can see our main sort of thoroughfares and such. All of this is pretty solid. I'm okay with this, and apparently I left a label on that one right there. We can see our temples. They're pretty well defined. Our bigger, maybe administrative buildings, not looking bad. Oh, another temple over here. And of course, the leadership right here. So, honestly, I'm kind of okay with the buildings and how I've drawn them. What I would do differently, though, you see this area here? It's almost between walls. I think having there be less buildings is fine. You know, if you've got this like really fortified location here and you've got a fortified location here, then certainly anything in between the two, you know, one could construe as being vulnerable. But I would, I think, draw more slums here, shacks and the likes. And that would look occupied, but it would look poor and like, I don't want to say downtrodden, but it would look a little bit more desperate. You know what I'm saying? Versus this almost looks like it's completely not part of the city at all. And I think it would. I think the poor would accumulate here. I think the people that can't afford the protection of these inner cities would accumulate here. And it would be visually a wonderful addition. So that's probably the only real major difference I would make. I will say that these gatehouses are bad. These are not bad. I've had a phase where I would not draw the walls on the sides, and that's kind of weak sauce. But here I have, you know? So it makes it more of a complete sort of kill zone. So I kind of like that. This is good. I've actually drawn maps after this, I feel, that didn't do that. The city overall has an interesting shape. I think it has a plausible shape. It's definitely, it feels to me like it is a rich city. It's definitely got something going on. The sheer volume of walls and fortifications, they're protecting something here, right? So, I mean, what have we got? Maybe 4,000, 8,000 souls living in this city? These guys have a little bit of coin. They definitely do. Also, kind of curious about this guy over here. And maps that make you curious about something, they're a +1 in the win category, without a doubt. You've got to have these little plot hooks. You've got to have these little locations where you go, what is that? Now let's go over to the coloring. The coloring of this almost completely transforms the city. Now you'll see that we still have uniform sort of farms, but because of the coloring, it sort of helps quite a little bit. We can change the tones of those greens so it's not quite so prominent. I love the coloring on this one. I love the water. It almost, I don't want to say it looks boiling, but it definitely looks active, right? There's definitely some interesting water mechanics going on here. This is pretty violent almost. And then we've got this incredible colour coming along here. And you'll notice that if we zoom in a little bit, got all of this lush grass here. I like that. And I also like the cobblestone that we've got going on, and the cobblestone on the roofs, and the texturing. This is something I actually don't do much of nowadays, because it's one way of colouring a simpler design, let's call it, but getting in the texturing on the top, with that combined with a different colouring and the shading and everything, really makes for a very interesting appearance. I should honestly get back to doing this a little bit more. My walls I do a little bit differently now, because I try to actually build in battlements on my drawings, so we definitely do them differently than this. I more gradually sort of blend in these edges, but colouring wise, I mean, this is on point, right? We can't fault this. This is pretty good, and I like it. Violetnesse. Now that said, that's what this was called when I drew it. This map is actually picked up by Fuck Art Games, and Fuck Art Games have relabeled this as Cat's Cradle, and they have added, I want to say, like 100 or 120 locations to this fully written book, sandbox environment. And so if you're interested in getting this map, you may want to check that out. Not only will you get the map, gridded and ungridded, but you will actually get all of the descriptions. And as a GM, I think it is an invaluable resource. So go check that out. I kind of like this. You know, if I'm going to score my younger self on this one, what is my scoring mechanism? Do I have a scoring mechanism? I feel like I need a scoring mechanism. I'm going to make up a scoring mechanism right here, right now. And you, my viewer, we're going to do this together. You know, I think we're going to do the decimation system, but kind of like a twist on it. And we're going to go like, how many decimations is this worth? Well, I think this has to be worth a solid 7 or 8 decimations, don't you think, out of 10? I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty on point. I think it's a very interesting looking city. And while there are a couple of places that I would tweak how I would, you know, approach them, the rest of it is pretty okay. So well done, younger me. Older me is still quite impressed by your work. Not bad, Faden. Not bad. If you enjoyed what we took a look at today, and if you enjoy maybe some of my other videos on this channel, then please consider hitting me up with a like. if I may woo you just a little bit more, then perhaps I can tease you into just nudging a little gentle caress on that subscribe button right there. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Really, truly, much love to you. I'm going to see you on the flip side.